The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello and welcome to this week's show of Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger, and joining me as a co-host this week is Kevin Pasley, former Major League catcher, and our guest this week is the always returning Dan Szymborski. Kevin, Dan, how you guys doing today?
Really well. Thank you. Good to be here.
Good so far, alive, so that's always a plus.
Alive and after a fight, no less. Excellent. So Dan.
Yep.
Tell me. Not much movement in the free agent market.
No,
although
we've had trades, but there hasn't been a lot in free agency. There's Carlos Santana, some relief pictures, and that's pretty much it.
And Matt Adams and Logan Morrison. No, Matt Adams and Yonder Alonso. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, Yonder Alonso. He did sign a 2-year, $16 million contract.
Now, him sign, with Carlos Santana signing, with and Keith Mullen re-signing with the Sox, and Yonder and Alonso signing, and Matt Adams. What does that do to Eric Hosmer's market?
It probably doesn't change it too much, but I don't think he's going to get that $100 million they were talking about at the start of the offseason, especially when you get Santana for $60 million. Now, obviously, Hosmer's younger, but Santana's better right now. So if you're paying for someone short term, I think that you're seeing a lot of what I talk a lot to agencies, to player agents, and a lot of what they predicted the last few years is kind of coming true. That you're kind of seeing a lot of the squeeze in the middle market, simply because some of the teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees really want to get under that luxury tax. It acts as a soft salary cap, and you see teams still going after the top tier free agents, but you're seeing kind of that middle class getting squeezed by replaceable players because everybody's building from within these days.
Yeah, and listen, when you think about it, we don't really have a top tier free agent this year as well.
Well, you're being greedy. You Darvish totally counts.
Well,
Bryce Harper, but I think you're being greedy.
Okay, yeah, greedy is not the word.
No,
spoiled.
You're totally greedy. You're jaded and spoiled from your New York experiences.
You make it sound like I'm the typical New York Yankee fan. I loved it when they dumped. And said, no, we're gonna build from within. We're gonna go in another direction. So. And so I take it you consider Yu Darvish the top pitching free agent, and who would you consider the top free agent bat?
That's a much harder one because when I look at the market, you see Darvish and you see really Arrieta kind of above the rest of the pack, because Arrieta and Darvish, these have been Cy Young type pitchers in the past. There's no real MVP type hitter that's available. Darvish could easily contend for a Cy Young award, but I like Lorenzo Cain. He's not going to. JD Martinez probably won't. He probably had his best year, which he was don't get me wrong, he was an awesome player, but they're also signing him for the next year. It's not his last year. He's limited defensively. Martinez is probably the best free agent hitter, though. And he's a really good player. I just think that Darvish and Arrieta are better.
Okay. So tell me something. I'm just curious. Did you have time to do any Zips projections?
For which player?
For my co-host.
Oh, for Kevin. No, I haven't. I don't know. A lot of times.
You probably didn't want to do that because it wouldn't be very zippy.
I know C.J. Nitkowski always saw his projections. He's like, oh, they're terrible, but true.
So, okay, so tell me.
Terrible, my goodness. That's harsh words, but I understand.
Now, tell me, have you started doing your projections for next year?
Yeah. 10 of them, I think it's 10 or 12. Actually, it might be, it's 11 until tomorrow. I have 11 teams up at Fangraphs that I've done this year. So we have a lot of the projections done. Now,
you're generally conservative in your projections.
Well, the future is hard to predict, so that's why Zips is naturally so-called conservative about it, because we're predicting, the mean result. And the mean result for most players isn't going to be like a huge step up. Even with prospects, the ones that succeed tend to be the ones that outperform expectations. There's kind of that selection bias in which the ones that survive are the ones that do a really good job. But projections are conservative simply because there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. Even with a star, people tend to overestimate just how certain a star's projection is.
Did you do the Yankees yet?
I haven't done the Yankees yet. I've done enough of the Yankees that I've been projecting them as kind of the best AL team, which, as a sort of Oriole fan, I mean, I say sort of now after stuff, it pains me to say the Yankees have the best projection in the AL. But right now, at least in the projections, they come out the best in the AL and just a hair behind the Dodgers, which, the Wheaties.
Let me ask you, when you formulate that, Dan, do you do that, you take an average, the club as an average has a higher rating than another ball club. If you had, Aaron Judge and you put in, the big guy in there, that's definitely going to jump the rate up a little bit.
Yeah, it includes Judge. When Zips runs projections, it also can simulate 1 million seasons of the upcoming season based on assumptions for how the roster is going to be configured. There's some leeway, like sometimes it'll predict Judge to be injured, and you get, say, a lot more Jacoby Ellsbury and stuff like that to kind of, get the variance. But in the middle, it comes out as a 95-96 team, generally on average. And, of course, the future being so uncertain, there's a lot of range there. But it's a really good team. I mean, They led Major League Baseball in home runs in 2017. Everybody who helped them do that is pretty much back. All the significant players, and they're adding the guy who hit the most home runs in 2017. So I would not like to be a fly ball pitcher in the AL East.
Not to mention if he remains healthy, they'll get a full year of Greg Bird.
Yeah, a full year of Greg Bird. I know people soured on him a little after his injuries and his kind of, but I think people sometimes take a limited amount of play way too seriously. Like, yeah, he hit pretty poorly in like 150 at-bats for the Yankees this year, but people shouldn't get too wrapped up in that because remember, Aaron Judge hit pretty poorly in 100 at-bats for the Yankees in 2016. You have to, consider the whole record. I do think Bird, the injury concerns are real just because he's lost that development time, and you don't really get that back. But I still think there's a good chance he'll be a league average first baseman in 2018. And that has a lot of value.
Well, putting the eyeballs to the Zips, so to speak, if you watched him, you can see him, improving almost on a daily basis, through the end of the season. And to me, he was one of their most consistent hitters in the postseason. So, I'm extremely optimistic, on Greg Bird. Now, what did Zips say about Mr. Judge? Are we expecting a letdown?
Well, there's always, a little bit of regression toward the mean. You never want to take a guy that hits that well and just say that's his baseline, but it still has him as one of the best sluggers in baseball. So there's no worry there, let's just say.
Okay. Now, is there anybody that stands out? I know like it's conservative, but Did any player have like what you would call a considerable jump in their projections from the year before?
One of the players that did have a jump is in San Diego now, Brian Mitchell. Zips really liked him as a relief pitcher. Thinks he can really have success in that role. So that's probably not exactly what you wanted to hear. But the Yankees have a pretty solid established team from top to bottom. I'm just trying to think who were the surprises.
I don't mean the Yankees alone. I mean anybody.
Oh, well, Zips loves Ronald Acuna of the Atlanta Braves and Ozzie Albies. Thinks that they'll both be pretty good players very quickly. Acuna is fascinating because he's extremely young, and he tore through the minors very, very quickly. So he's going to be one of the players I'm fascinated to see because Zips is, as you said, it's conservative because there's a lot of uncertainty. When it projects a guy to be that good that quickly at age 20, it's something to watch because I've only had a few projections for rookies that young that are as good as Acuna. One of them was Mike Trout, who has the best projections of any rookie I've ever done, and Chris Bryant, who wasn't quite as young, but he also blew through the minors very quickly. So he's one of the players I'm very fascinated to see. And they've cleared the outfield spot for him with that whole the Matt Kemp trade. That would have been like a huge trade in 2010, but in 2017 was just kind of a salary reallocation trade like you see in basketball.
Yes. Yeah, that was interesting. Do you think the Dodgers are going to keep Kemp?
Oh no, I would be surprised if he even played a game for them.
So would I. I would too. I mean, I think there's so much talent out there. I wouldn't. Kemp's had his day in the sun. I think he could help some club, maybe another ball club in another situation. I think, but the Dodgers got to play with the guys who've done the job for him last year. Let him sink or swim. I don't know if Kemp's, is he ready to play and get 500 ABs or 400 ABs? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think he can physically even do that anymore. He's broken down pretty consistently. His weight's been a problem in the season. Defense, of course, is an issue. And it's kind of awkward since when he left the Dodgers, there were some pretty hurt feelings on either side of the part. I don't know if the team really wants to revisit that. They really only acquired Kemp so that they could have that salary spread out over 3 years instead of 1 year for all those players that were left, Gonzalez and Kazmir and McCarthy and all of them. So I see them paying most of his contract and sending him to an AL team because he can still contribute as a DH, especially if they have a good lefty bat on the bench that can spell Kemp. I'm not sure exactly what that place would be, but I think they either flip him to the AL or they release him in spring training, let him try to latch on somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling he's going to get released. I have a feeling everybody's going to wait them out. I don't see, based on the glut of other bats, DH type bats available. I have a feeling he's going to get released. It's that is of course the problem. You can say that you can say would be a good part-time DH. You can say that about a lot of players, and nobody really wants to pay for that. So, I mean, you can say that, about Logan Morrison would be a better player. You can say that, pretty much about, there's a lot of those kinds of bad. You can say that really about Howie Kendrick. I mean, is Kemp really any better than Howie Kendrick is? And Howie Kendrick, he could at least play the field and even fake second base in a pinch still. So, I mean, who would take it? So, you are probably right that even if they try to flip him to the AL, I do think they're going to end up having to release him simply because there's just not a lot of motivation. So let's get to your favorite team, Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm not really that happy with the team right now.
It's understandable. You're not happy, but you're still a fan. I know you're still a fan. So what do you think of what do you think the Orioles should do?
They had to start rebuilding, but they're not going to. It's a team that I even very publicly said that I just can't root for the team right now until they have a change in ownership or a drastic change in philosophy. Because what really kind of it's been building up for a while for me, and one of the things that has really gotten on me is that they refuse to even participate in signing international free agents. It's against their philosophy. They don't sign international free agents, and that's
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, every team signs international free agents. All those teams in the AL East that are going to spend more money than them, which is 3 of the 4 other teams, they all participate in international free agents. So the Orioles were hamstringing themselves. And then it came out that they didn't even make an offer to Ohtani. And even if he probably wasn't going to sign with them, I mean, I'm pretty sure he wasn't, that doesn't excuse not trying. The Mets tried to sign Ohtani. They gave a real presentation to his team. The Reds made a presentation to Ohtani, and they were so determined to sign him that even after he eliminated them, they still kept pitching to his team to try to change his mind. Brought in like their old all-stars, like who did they bring in? Well, they brought in, I think, Don Gullett and some of their old Reds to try to talk with him. And it didn't work, but they tried. They made an effort. The Orioles, they didn't even make a presentation. They didn't even reach out to Ohtani. Dan Duquette went on the radio and said, well, we don't participate in the posting system because it's against our philosophy. It's like, it's against your philosophy to bring in Ohtani? That's against your philosophy? I mean, it isn't like you were going to be willing to pay him in free agency and if he came in 3 years when he would probably make over $150 million. You weren't going to do that, so we just never, ever get a player like that, like even by accident?
Did anybody from the Orioles ever state why they don't participate in the posting system or they don't sign international free agents?
Well, they have an argument that it's exploitive, which of course is true. But there's a lot of exploitive things they happily participate in. They happily participate in the draft, which is extremely exploitive. They happily field a full set of minor league teams, and those guys get horribly underpaid. I mean, they get nothing. The low minors, it's worse than a minimum wage job if you're not one of those guys that had a big signing bonus. That's exploitive, too. I don't see the Orioles paying their minor leaguers more than other teams to not exploit them. I don't see them paying Manny Machado more than $500,000 a year when they didn't have to pay him more than that because it was exploitive. I think that if they took a philosophical stand, that's one thing. But I think at that point, since the whole system to an extent is exploitive to the people who haven't succeeded and become stars, then if you're that concerned about it, then why are you even in the sport? I mean, you're a part of the system at that point. So it's very frustrating. So all it means is that
it's an excellent point.
Yes, and you know what? And talk about broken system. Kevin actually is one of those players with less than 4 years of service time that was excluded from the pension agreement, where anyone before, was it 1980?
1980.
Kevin? Yeah.
Yes, 1980. Anybody who didn't have 4 years vested did not receive any type of pension whatsoever.
And after 1980, you just needed what? 1 day in the majors?
1 day you could buy into the Major League Medical Plan, and 43 days allowed you to get a full pension. The minimum for a player who played 43 days after 1980 is $34,000 a year, up to the maximum being $215,000 a year. And don't tell me Ken Griffey Jr. needs the pension money. I don't think he does. But I don't begrudge him that at all. But the point is, you got people who have $100 million in the bank getting $213,000 a year, for a pension that they deserve. But going over the whole scenario, it's kind of, I think it's wrong that players prior to 1980 do not receive a dime. And some of them have, like a Carmen Fanzone and the players like that, Theodore, the guys who played 2, 3, 4 years, just about made it, don't get a dime. And they help their ball clubs win, and they help the major league players of today make the money that they make. They put in the blood, sweat, and tears. So some more so than others. But so I think it's wrong. But we shall see how it proceeds.
So Dan,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, and it does suck because one thing that the MLBPA should have done when they got all the benefits is they should have gone back and taken care of the people that were involved in the early MLBPA before all that happened. I mean, the people. I mean, this should be going. I think. What year did Miller replace? What was it? Judge Cannon? I don't remember, but the early guys.
74 or 71, 2 or 3. I don't know. Something like early 70s.
It was around. Yeah, and it was those early guys that also had to, fight for the rights that the MLBPA improved on. So they really should have gone back to take care of some of those guys that were involved in those early fights. So no, I have no disagreement there. The MLBPA, I don't think they fight for the same things they did as when Marvin Miller was around.
That's for sure.
Oh no,
they're on easy street. Somewhat on easy street now. They can go. They get a tremendous. Look at the boost in pay now. The salary in 2018, 2019, they started $545. That's your minimum salary in the major leagues. $545,000, which of course I think they deserve. But just to throw the guys under the bus like that before 80 is kind of it's laughable. It's a joke. It's terrible, really. But it is what it is.
So now, Dan, I just want to get back to Manny Machado real quick. What type of offers did you hear that that Baltimore was getting for him?
They were getting offers that weren't quite as rich. It's always hard to tell. I didn't physically go to the winter meetings this year, so I mostly, I talked to people obviously, but I wasn't quite there in the scrum, so I didn't hear all the details of exactly some of the offers were. I mean, from what I heard, none of them were really that rich, because a team that's going to trade a lot for Manny Machado is also going to be wanting it to be a team that has a realistic chance at signing Manny Machado. And there's only a handful of teams that are going to pay $300 million. So if you're not already willing to pay $300 million to extend him, it's hard for teams to give like a super lucrative package just to bring him in for 1 year. Like the Cardinals would do it, but they're not going to. I don't think they were going to give up Luke Weaver for Machado. They like Machado, and of course, obviously you should like Machado. But I began to think that the Orioles don't actually trade him and just end up taking the draft pick, because they've even a lot of the Baltimore reporters who are very connected with the internal runnings of the team more than I am. I don't actually know the front office very well at all. They say that it's unlikely that Angelos will even approve a Machado trade in the end, and he has interfered with trades before, even small ones. Like 20 years ago, they were going to trade Alan Mills for Kurt Manwaring, which isn't exactly a blockbuster trade, and still Angelos stepped in to prevent even that from happening, which is understandable. It's kind of a crappy trade, but I don't think the Orioles are really a modern team, and I don't think they can really compete with less money and less smarts than the other teams. I mean, if you have less money than someone, you have to compete with them by, taking risks, being imaginative, being smarter than them. But I don't think the Orioles are. I think they're poor and stupid.
Well, let me ask you.
It bode well for Buck, does it?
Yeah. Now, do you think is Buck? Do you consider Buck part of that Stone Age approach, or do you think he has some present day leanings, so to speak?
Well, I think, one thing is that he is the manager, and he's not the one who's building the roster. The bigger problem is simply that Duquette and Showalter don't really communicate that well with each other. And even that can be crippling, even if it's not like, say, an elite, super modern plan. Like with the Yankees, I don't think anyone in the organization was actually unhappy with how Joe Girardi managed the team. But they simply believe that with a manager that could be kind of on the same wavelength as Cashman, that they would do better long term. Because Girardi could be an emotional guy. Cashman's kind of a cool cucumber, or at least tries to be. And so there were some times where they clashed. You look at teams like the Astros and Cubs. Not only are they very aggressive, with modern thinking, but you see the manager and the front office, they get along. There's no fighting. They work as a team. Joe Madden and Theo Epstein are a team. A.J. Hinch and Jeff Lunau and all those guys in the Houston front office, they're a team too. Terry Francona and the Indians front office, they're also a team. And I think that's the kind of communication you need, because when you're spending a lot of money and you're executing long-term plans, you need to have everybody kind of on the same page to some degree.
Absolutely.
But you would think, even though they're not on the same page, you would think Buck Showalter would certainly have a bit more voice than the average manager, even in today's game.
Yeah, I think a lot of managers have their role to play. And I don't think that Buck is really the kind of guy you have for a rebuild. I don't see him having the patience with that. Same with Dusty Baker. I think Dusty Baker was a really good manager for the Nationals at that point, because what they had was a fairly veteran clubhouse, that there was a lot of infighting with the manager, with Matt Williams, who had lost control of the team. And that's the kind of environment that Dusty Baker or a Buck Showalter will thrive in. But I think as the Orioles go kind of into a new era where they're necessarily going to have to rebuild, there's no question about it. They don't have pitching. They don't have a farm system that's really going to replace the pitching, and they don't have the money to buy pitching. Machado's a free agent. Adam Jones is a free agent. Even though he's in decline, they can't replace him internally either. Scope's going to be a free agent in a couple years. So it's a team that's necessarily going to have to go through a rebuilding phase. And I actually don't see either Duquette or Showalter being around in the end for that.
Well, didn't Duquette didn't he try to interview for another position a couple of years ago, and Peter Angelos put the nix on that?
Yeah, I think it was the Blue Jays he wanted to go to.
Yeah,
I think it was the Blue Jays that were interested in him. And the Orioles asked for Jeff Hoffman in return, which wasn't going to happen. It's hard to tell what Duquette's real feelings are, because he can't just go out and bash Peter and the Peter in the media. I think Sandy Alderson with the Mets is kind of in the same position. I think with a better owner, Sandy Alderson would be very happy. But everybody is in that position, whether in baseball or out. I can't talk bad about my bosses even when they do something I don't like.
Yeah, but Sandy Alderson can't be too unhappy. He just signed re-signed or signed an extension, so he can't be too unhappy. So,
it's complicated.
Now, let's go back to free agents. Are there any fits that you see? Is there anything that you look at and you say, man, this makes so much sense for this team and this player. This makes so much sense for this team and this player. Is there anything that's just so obvious?
I would love to see Jake Arrieta with the Angels. They need pitching. Jake Arrieta's a pitcher, so that right there, that's a good match. But second, he's a huge ground ball guy. He gets outs with that really heavy, sinker / two-seamer / whatever that he throws, because boundaries are kind of foggier than people act like. But he gets those with the grounders, and you have an infield with Ian Kinsler at second, Andrelton Simmons at shortstop, and now Zach Cozart at third base, that is an infield that can handle ground balls really well. So I would definitely like to I would like that to happen. Obviously, no one's appointed me the dictator of baseball, in which case a lot of things would be different. But I think that is one of my favorite matches of the players that are remaining. I'll probably write about it soon if he doesn't sign.
Does Zips project a better year for Arrieta than not that he had a terrible year, but does Zips project an improvement for Arrieta this year?
Zips is optimistic about at Arrieta. I mean, he's not at the Cy Young kind of level that he was a couple years ago, but there's obviously still a chance he can get back there. I think in the right situation with a good defense that he'd really thrive again. Although I don't ever want to project that he'll have that Cy Young season. I think it'll be a really, really good picture, and the Angels, they can use just an okay picture, and Arrieta more than fills that role.
And what kind of money do you think he's going to see eventually?
I think it'll be, in this market, I think he'll see similar money to Johnny Cueto. Say somewhere $120 million, maybe more if there's no weird opt-out clause. I think you're going to start to see teams be a little less willing to give those opt-out clauses and no trade clauses. Because you look at the Stanton situation in Miami, the Marlins, Loria's team, they just threw in that no trade clause. Apparently the front office was against it, but the Marlins, the ownership, they threw in the no trade clause like it was a party favor, like a gift bag. And obviously, the new ownership came in, and I think they expected Stanton to just waive the no trade clause. There was no attempt at buy-in from Stanton to try to get him. They pretty much just told him where he was going to go and demanded he waive it, which of course he wasn't at that point. When someone does it in that way, you're going to say, no, I'm not doing anything you want me to. So I think that we'll start to see with some of these contracts probably no trades and opt-outs not being thrown around quite that aggressively.
Well, now, speaking of Mr. Stanton, or speaking of the Marlins, any words on the Marlins situation?
Well, other than they're horrible, there's not really a lot to report.
Okay.
Sorry, I turned off my phone. I don't know why they were calling me.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. So what do you think of Mr. Jeter in his role so far as president of the Marlins?
Well, let's just say if you went back a few years ago, like say we're going back in a time machine to 2014, and you told me that A-Rod would be the much beloved retired player, and Derek Jeter would be the reviled, publicly evil executive, I would have thought you were lying. Like there's no way that future's happening. But we're kind of there. I think that he's bitten off more than he can chew. It's pretty hard to just throw yourself into a front office at that level of responsibility instantly at this point. And he's a part owner. He gets a $5 billion a year salary. He only paid in $20 million. It's really hard to tell how much of him is a figurehead and how much of it is him doing a poor job. Because there clearly was a very poor job done communicating with Stanton.
Absolutely.
Oh, without a doubt. But basically, that was the deal. He gets $5 million a year for 4 years, and that's to repay, for him to get back the money he laid out. Which, a guy that earned, I think the number was like $369 million in between Major League Baseball and endorsements. He's earned $369 million. But even though he put out $20 million, he has to make sure he gets a salary that makes it back in 4 years. I found the whole financial the whole financial, how can I say it, template with, of the deal kind of puzzling. And I stated about a month and a half ago, I had a Miami-based radio personality on the show, and I was like, even though this guy is, Bruce Sherman is loaded, I still, I look at it, I say they just seem to be underfinanced. Like, once again, like Miami got stuck with another one of those ownerships.
Yeah, they've had 4 owners, Huizenga, Henry, Loria, and now Sherman, and 3 of them have been absolutely terrible. I mean,
I don't see that ball club doing anything this year either.
That's the thing.
The talent's very bad talent, very poor talent at the time. Not to say they're, the players, they're not major league, top echelon ball players. It's more like a minor league team now. It really is, except for Yelich. He's gonna be gone soon too. Everybody's gonna vacate Miami, and nobody's gonna go to the games. Very few people will go to the ballpark, and their TV packages are horrendous. They don't draw very well. I mean, on television either. They don't have a good base of Miami Marlins fans, in my opinion.
It's even hard to blame the Marlins fans because they've really been subject to this, constant fire sale mentality now for 25 years. If you go to a restaurant so often and they pee in your soup, it's not going to be long before people just won't go to the restaurant anymore. It's not about supporting the restaurant. It's about not being given a bowl of garbage.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they did get a couple world championships, but I think if the Marlins won 95 games this year, they'd still be last in the NL in attendance. That's just just to go back, I think that the Marlins have a situation that's not a lot different from the 80s Mariners. Seattle, their attendance was terrible. George Argyros did not do a good job with running the team. They were very cheap, and they had struggled really since the expansion year, and they didn't rebound. The organization didn't rebound. They had to make significant investments in the team and changing the culture around the team before they brought the players, before they brought the fans back. Some of the Marlins owners have this idea that the Marlins have to come and, the Marlins fans have to come and support the team, and then they'll invest in the team. But that's not how it works. You have to give the fans a reason to care about the team. You have to give the fans a reason to invest in the Marlins brand and not just root for the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers. And they're not doing that. They need an ownership that would invest in a team. They need someone with deep pockets and knows how to do this. They should have begged like a Mark Cuban to buy the Marlins, not Bruce Sherman, who's already looking for other investors because, as you said, he doesn't want to invest in the team. He just wants to let it run itself and cash out in 5 years.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And the Wilpons did the same thing with the Mets some years ago too. They were like, well, when we get some attendance, we'll put some money in the team. It was the same way here. I mean, but from what I understand, the books, why anybody would buy that team for that price based on the debt service that it has is beyond me. And I'm not a CPA, but I looked at some of the numbers. It's like I can do the math a little bit, I just don't see it. So
very much like they say, he's just looking to cash out in about 5 years. Someone like the movie Major League, they want the ball club to lose so they can tank it, and then they can go ahead and reap the benefit. Until the ball club, the Cleveland team won with the Wild thing and all. I like that movie. That's what it seems like going on in Miami.
Yeah, but I tell you, considering that they paid $1.2 billion for that team,
amazing.
You know what? I don't see them cashing out in 5 years. That's for sure. But
well, you never know. Eventually a Marlin owner won't be able to cash out because Loria, he paid like what $150 million, and the owners like lent him all that money, and he of course cashed out for a lot of money.
Interest-free.
Yeah, you won't get changes with the Marlins until an owner buys the Marlins, runs it terribly, and loses money on the sale. If he sells it in 5 years for $2.2 billion, then we're just back to where we started, and we'll have to wait for the next guy to screw up, and hopefully, because I forget who it was. Some observer in baseball observed about ownership at the time. This was in the early days of the MLBPA, and they said if you ask owners, nobody ever seemed to make any money. Yet the prices of the franchises keep coming up, but somehow nobody's ever made any money ever.
Not a dime. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, ownership. George Steinbrenner, he had to drive around driving an old Gremlin from '78. I'm sure.
George Steinbrenner never complained about not making money.
You're right. That was just the first owner. Okay, let's say Gus Bush. He never drove around in a Gremlin. Yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
That wasn't fair to George.
I mean, listen. I believe me as a longtime Yankee fan. I can, go on and on about things that George made us suffer through. But one thing, he never complained about it. He was like, no, you got to spend money. You got to sign these players, and that way you'll put fannies in the seats, and you'll make money, and you'll be able to sign more players. I mean, that was the business model, and that was the business model for many, many years until, they finally, had to take another direction, and I think the business model in a way kind of hurt them because they went from being a well-rounded, interwoven baseball team to becoming a fantasy team, and it doesn't matter, all those players on paper. Just the sum, I should say the parts didn't make the sum. Whereas, as opposed to, the team, let's say pre-2004, the sum exceeded the parts. I mean, they had great players, but they, who did they have they didn't have players on that team that you would say, well, that guy, he's like top 5 player in the game. They didn't have that. They had all-stars. They had role players, but everything meshed. Everything was interwoven. And the sum, when you look at the players and you look at the other teams and you look at their results, you can even say in that situation the sum, exceeded the parts, whereas they, the business model took them in another direction, in my opinion.
And the team's being run a lot better in recent years. You look at the team now, it's much better balanced than it's been in a long time. I mean, you have some of the stars still making big money, but you have a lot of young players. You have, the Judges, the Gary Sanchez's, which has been nice to see. It's made the team much more interesting. But there is one time that Steinbrenner complained about money. You can't forget the Steinbrenner Dave Winfield fiasco, where
Mr. May.
Yeah, because what happened when he signed the 10-year deal, sometime in the early 80s, I forget what year it was, but there was kind of a miscommunication, and Steinbrenner didn't realize he was signing Winfield to a contract that had a cost of living escalator in it, and
yes.
And apparently when Steinbrenner found out, he blew up and screamed at pretty much everybody in that office, and they all avoided him for a week to try to stay away from him because he was in such a bad mood about that. Because the contract ended up being 50% more than Steinbrenner had thought they were signing Winfield for. And of course that started off, a big feud between the two of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then of
Well,
course,
you got to be on top of that.
Yeah. So, Dan, I know your time is a little short. I truly appreciate you coming on again. And
Always fun.
I guess hopefully the next time I see you, we'll be getting close to spring training, and rosters will have been somewhat sorted out, and
things will have happened.
Things
but,
will have
But you see, for a writer, it's not that bad because we still get to do all the speculation. But if everybody signs late, we don't have that late January problem of trying to figure out what to write about when nothing's happening. So if they want to delay it, have it spread out all the way into spring training before the signings are made, then I'm cool with that, just for personal reasons.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although for someone like a Jerry Krasnick, he has to have his ear to the wall all the time because of all the comings and goings.
Jerry loves
you're
his
writing.
job.
Yeah. Oh, he does.
Jerry
But
loves his job.
But I remember having him on, and I was going to say, this is probably and we had him on, it was winter, it was wow, when do you get a break? He said, actually, once the season gets underway, he says May is usually a quieter time for him,
Yeah, it's the same with me, because things are happening, but, it's still early. So I usually have the same kind of problem. Really, it's late January, it's kind of late April, early May. And then it's August, the middle of August, when there's nothing, it's obviously there's pennant races, but you don't really have any moves being made, and the final post waiver deadline moves aren't being made either. So those are the hardest times for me. It's funny. The first time I met Jerry, I actually gave him a ride to the airport. Him and Steve Gardner from USA Today. It was the Reds All-Star game, and we were at a party at Trent Rosecrans' house. He's a reporter for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And I gave him a ride to the airport, and I was really embarrassed because my check engine light came on. And I'm like, oh, he's going to think I'm small time if I can't get my car fixed or something. He didn't notice, but I was personally embarrassed that my check engine light came on. And it was like a $90 issue, but it embarrassed me. I doubt he even noticed, but it's I was mad at my car, man, you're screwing me over here. I'm meeting a colleague for the first time, and you're making me look Bush League.
You gotta get out of that gremlin there, Dan.
Yeah. It
was an exhaust thing, and it was nothing, so it was okay.
Good.
It's a stupid thing to be embarrassed about, but I totally was.
Well, let me tell you something. I actually owned a 1973 Gremlin. It was actually the first brand new car I owned, and after that, it took me so that was 1973. I did not purchase a new car again until 2002. But my Gremlin, I had a Gremlin X with a V8. Okay? Now, I know it sounds monstrous, but it was 1973, and cars were that's when they were just adding stuff on to engines to keep down emissions. So 73 and 74 were probably the piggiest cars, as far as performance went. So the performance was kind of disappointing.
I'm looking up now. They had that little car. It got up to a 6.6 liter V8. That's ridiculous.
Yes, a 304 V8. It was a 304. Yes. But it was a standard 304 2-barrel. It wasn't a 4-barrel. And yeah, it was, it was like I say, it was kind of disappointing. But what are you going to do? But and back then you ordered a car to be built, so I actually got it in this really nice metallic chocolate brown color. It was a custom color. It cost me a whole extra $35 for that color. And but like I say, I'll never.
If you had that car now, it'd be probably worth double it was then. The old Brenda chocolate.
You know what? I think it cost me $3,200 with tax, which was a lot of money for a Gremlin. But I mean, I got the X package, I got the V8, and I got it all done up. So
you got all the bells and whistles.
Got all the bells and whistles.
What my mom had in the early 70s before I was born, she had one of the first Toyotas that came over here. And she still had that when I was born. I was born in 78. She had that really into the mid-80s. Just this little Toyota Corolla, got incredible gas mileage, and all the controls were like in Japanese. Like the air conditioner was called like the Nippo Denso.
Wow. Well, it's funny because my very first car, the car I had before that Gremlin, was a 1970 Toyota Corolla. So it got incredible gas mileage, and gas was only like 30 cents a gallon as well back then.
Yeah, my mom had a lot of weird cars because she had a Corolla, then she had a Chevrolet Monte Carlo, and then she got the Chevy Celebrity that had been rebuilt with a Caprice engine, and it was a more powerful engine than the original Celebrity had. So it was fun when I was learning to drive that car, because that Celebrity was like this rectangle of death.
Yeah.
You could get that thing could, you motor the shit out of that thing. It would get to 80 like with no effort at all.
Wow. Yeah, I can just picture you like pulling up to the light and like, with a car, with a Caprice engine, even though it was like a standard engine, like pulling up to the light, in a light car like that, just like, next to a hot rod and just blowing them off. So
that thing was like,
wow.
just like a big solid rectangle. I remember some years later when she still had the car, she was having a house built, and she was going to work in the morning, and she actually backed up into the builder's car in the fog and didn't realize it. And just from the corner of that rectangular Celebrity, it like caved in half his car. She didn't even realize it. There wasn't a dent on that Celebrity. If the transmission hadn't eventually gone, she'd still be driving that. Because that thing, you could drive, like, action movies where, like, they do those unrealistic scenes where cars, like, jump through building windows and dive out the other thing. You could just smash through a building with that steel rectangle of death.
Wow. Outstanding.
Pretty funny.
So, okay,
well, anyway,
Dan.
I do have to go, but it's always fun, Wayne. Tweet me.
Oh yes, and Dan, one other thing. Okay, try to make the winter meetings next year, particularly if they're in Orlando.
Yeah, I don't know where they're next year. They move it all over the place.
That's a shame. Too bad it's not a constant. But well, who knows?
The problem is,
maybe
I don't do a lot of reporting, and so I'm not always. It becomes mostly a hanging out and drinking thing for me, and I'm not supposed to be drinking as much as I do. I'm supposed to be, I've been pretty good. I've been backing off on that because all that beer is apparently pretty bad for my weight. There's a lot of calories in beer, so
maybe
rumor has it.
Maybe they can send you on a spring training tour to Florida. And if you hang out with me, you won't drink beer because I don't drink. Okay? So.
Okay, well, anyway, you guys have a good one. I do have to jet.
Hey, take care, Dan. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Very interesting.
So you guys have a good one. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. So, Kevin, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was very, very interesting listening to
I'm losing you.
No, but the power might be going out on this cell phone. So if you lose me, that's the reason. But,
okay, that's okay. But I hope you had fun. And
absolutely, I always have fun. It's a great. I really appreciate the opportunity. And boy, oh boy, I'm going to be checking zips out. That's for sure. I'm much more, I know much more, obviously, much more about it now. And I want to, check in and see how, it really works regarding the Yankees, because the Yankees, he said they're loaded, and we know they are, and they might. The Yankees are looking at picking him up, which is going to be a detriment to Bird. And I'm like you. I believe in Greg Bird. I think he's going to be I like his demeanor. He's got that big stick. He can go deep, and he can go deep at Yankee Stadium. And, if he gets consistent, I'd like to see him hit about 280, hit 25 dingers, drive it up, 90 to 110. You got Hicks, you got the big guys, and you got Aaron Judge. And, I mean, this ball club is stacked. So I'm looking forward to it. Didi, it's short. I mean, I just can't see. I'm really happy they signed CC too, Wayne. What do you think? What do you think about that sign?
Oh no, listen, that was a no-brainer. I tell you, you know what? And beyond the monster lineup they have, they probably have the deepest bullpen in baseball.
Yes. No question about it, and that is
now. To me, I think they have a little bit of a dilemma because they don't. Besides Chapman as their closer, they don't have a lefty setup guy. So you look at the lineup. They got Conley, they got Robertson, they've got Chad Green, they've got Adam Warren, they've got Betances. So, that's
who's that lefty? They had a left-hander. They had the tall.
Chasen Reed. They got Chasen Reed.
Yeah, I like him. He's a little inconsistent, but he can be that lefty. I think. They all throw hard, and he can be the lefty that you're talking about. What do you think about is Betances, the big boy? Is he going to get it done? Is he going to come back and have a solid, consistent year? I mean, I think he is, and I would never, ever consider getting rid of him or moving him. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? I'd love to see him do well. I actually caught him pitch, when was it? It was actually the day after, it was July 5th, because I went to the game with my son, and it was, unfortunately, it was like one of his typical poor outings where he couldn't get, he couldn't get the ball over the plate. And
right.
I tell you, I wish I had an answer. It's just, and I know when a guy is that tall and his limbs are that long, I understand. Repeating the delivery is more difficult, and I've been told by other pitchers that also when you're that big, if your mechanics are off, your control will be off for more. Like he's 6'8", so basically what they were saying, like you take a 6-foot pitcher, his mechanics, in other words, like the.
Well, I certainly understand what you're saying. You're right.
Greater. Yeah, the separation is greater. So, it's almost like gear ratios, so to speak, like you're making a certain adjustment with a certain gear, like that kind of thing. So.
Maybe they should bring in the big unit. Have him, go over some fundamental mechanics with him. I mean, Larry Rothschild was signed again, and Larry's been in the game. I played with him in Evansville back in the 70s when he was the Tigers. But he's been, he's a highly touted pitching coach. I'm sure he's got a definite plan for contact a little bit off and taking down farther. It's going to go out farther. The fastball's going to rise. It's going to come in the zone. But if he's on, man, Forget about it. It's over.
Yeah. We're losing you again on the static. So you know what?
Oh, okay.
We will. I'm sure we will have an opportunity to pick up a conversation about Betances again as things start to unfold in spring training, which isn't all that far away. So
Not at all. It's right around the corner. Looking forward to that, and let's hope that I don't know about my football Giants coming up this week. They're here in Arizona, so I'm going to go out and see them, and we shall see how that pans out. But you know, a couple ball players do well, and if they lose, they lose. We get second round pick.
At this point, I was about to say, at this point, you want them to lose. They're not going anywhere. It's
right.
Like.
It's like against my religion to want them to lose, but I understand completely.
I know.
Right now they're looking at the second pick in the draft.
As a Jet fan, we had no expectations, and the slogan was "Suck for Sam," So
yeah,
that's how it is. I mean, and listen, it's not a bad business model. Take a look at the Astros. Take a look at the Cubs.
It's a darn good business model, and it works. And even I think people in the country who didn't really like the Cubs at all thought they were, over the years and years of non-winning. Now there's a lot of folks out there who take the Cubs to heart. I think a lot of Americans like the ball club better for one reason or another. I mean, I had that feeling. They're just a better club. They're run better, and they're presented better, and they're interesting to watch. They got a nice.
Yeah. And I lost you again. So, Kevin, we're going to close out the show, and everybody, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week, and I don't hear Kevin at all, so it's quite possible his phone just crapped out. But we'll be back next week. I'll make sure he has a full charge, and see you then.